Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. I am Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory. Back again by special request, Mr. Paul Furiga. Thanks again for coming on board, Paul, with such short notice. You were just on a few weeks ago, but glad to have you back. You know, we're here at Center for Victory to help people unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. And who better to have on than the official storyteller himself, Paul Furiga. Glad to have you back, Paul.
Geez, Eric, thanks for that introduction. I really appreciate it. It's great to be back, and that special request, it'll get you every time.
And can you just make sure everybody knows, because there's probably some new folks that are listening, and if not, just remind people who you are, what you do, and what you've been doing inside your company?
Absolutely, Eric. So WordWrite is a company that's focused on helping clients uncover, develop, and share what we call their capital S story. That's the story that stands above all others because it answers these critical questions: why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. When we help our clients uncover that story, we help them develop it and then share it with everyone who needs to see it or hear it or experience it. Frequently, the clients who find the most value in working with us are providers of complex products or services. In fact, the more difficult it might be for someone to explain simply what it is that they do or the value that their company provides, the more likely that we'll be able to help them by stripping away and revealing the true narrative that describes the character and nature of their organization.
And it's a phenomenal process. I can speak firsthand. We went through it way back when.
You did. You were brave, sir.
Yeah. And it's been extremely helpful. I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke here. We went through that whole process with you, with your staff. And, it was a great experience. So I would suggest, at the end of this, if you like what you hear, and you get a hold of Paul, we'll share your information later, Paul, but just to make sure everybody knows, because we're going to be digging out some of this information here. If you're watching, finding your capital S story, why your story drives your brand. It's the book that Paul just released. And we're going to be kind of digging into sort of the chapter 3. I've asked Paul to kind of pivot a little bit because it's so pertinent to what we do here at Center for Victory, what Paul does as well. But that is not just your story externally,
yes,
but your story internally. So I'm going to shut up a little bit here, Paul, because I'm actually, again, starting to get excited about this, as I told you before we got on
That's
here.
Great.
This younger crowd, everybody calls millennials and now the Zers, right, are coming.
That's right.
in. Why is story so important to this younger crowd?
Well, that's really a great question and an important one. And here we are recording this episode in 2021, and I'm not really sure if we're still in a global pandemic or what's that word, endemic, for, it'll be just like the flu. But one of the big issues is talent, right? And what talent are we talking about? Primarily, we're talking about millennials and Gen Z. And probably a lot of folks don't know this, but the largest generation ever in the history of the world, millennials. People think it's baby boomers, but it's not. Actually, more millennials are alive today than baby boomers ever were at the height of that generation. Mm-hmm. And Generation Z, as you pointed out, is right behind it. Now, why do these folks like stories? Well, think about what they've lived through, most recently the pandemic, but a lot of other world events. Some of the older folks and the millennial generation, one of their first memories was 9/11. And then in 2008 and 2009, there was this global recession. In fact, a fair share of millennials were coming out of college or high school during that time and had a darn hard time getting a job. Now, that's just the economic aspect. If you look at the societal aspect and all the things that have changed, what we have today is a generation that is enormously skeptical of traditional ways of learning about the value of things. And when I say traditional, I mean 20th century ideas. Key among them would be advertising and marketing. So this is an extremely skeptical audience. In fact, in the book, in this chapter, chapter 3, as you mentioned, I relate a couple of examples, including research that's been done with millennials that shows they are enormously distrustful of advertising. What do they respect more than that? What do they turn to? Stories. They love storytelling. They love the idea of learning from the firsthand experience of others what really works for them, whether you're talking about life experiences or products or services.
I think what's interesting about that too, Paul, is how that goes into, and I don't know if you want to speak to the why of why they don't trust that traditional advertising and marketing, but
Sure.
but it also speaks to what they want, like in the workplace. Right?
Yes.
They want development. They're willing to listen to the stories as older folks are pushing that down. But I don't want to get too much off topic. But tell us why they, from your perspective, doing what you do, why did they fear that kind of traditional advertising, marketing kind of shtick?
Because they saw themselves, experienced themselves being lied to primarily, or having what's that psychological term, Eric? Cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
Where the advertising and marketing was telling them one thing, but in their life experience, they were seeing and feeling something different. So they're highly skeptical of these means of communicating with them. They expect to be lied to. Related to that, for millennials and Gen Z, a lot of them saw their parents buy into what was promised through these traditional means of advertising and marketing, and they saw them get laid off, downsized, experience financial difficulties, and that only added to their distrust of these traditional means of communicating with them. So to your point, here we are in a situation where talent is critical. And organizations that rely on more traditional means of attracting talent to the workplace are going to have a very, very hard time, because that's not what millennials and Gen Z are looking for. They're looking for what Simon Sinek, and I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. His first book was called Start With Why. The second book was called Leaders Eat Last. His most recent book is called The Infinite Game. And the basic premise that he unveils in this book is that there are some companies who are not in business just to keep score and go quarter to quarter and have enormous profits, that they understand that life is an infinite game, and so is business. And what animates them is what he calls a just cause, something bigger than simply being profitable or growing by adding employees or customers. That's what millennials and Gen Z want. Research shows, surveys show, that they are attracted to organizations that align with their own personal values and beliefs. They want to make a difference in the world.
So I guess to quote in your book, storytelling returns.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is a gold nugget. If you're listening right now, this is about to be a huge, huge gold nugget that Paul is going to lay on us. They don't want ads. They want stories. So it never has gone, right? I think that's what you say in the book. No. It's never gone. How can we like get into this so it's beneficial to everybody? Because it just doesn't work for them. It's going to work for us internally, even as we get talent to those people, but even as we sell to those same kind of people, correct?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So when I define the capital S story, Eric, I go in this order. I say buy. Why would somebody buy, work, invest, or partner with you? And there's a reason why they're in that order. It's because most often when we work with companies, they are first and foremost interested, as you said, externally in who they're trying to sell their products, services, ideas to. Secondarily, they're interested in talent. And as you pointed out when we started today, maybe that's become the most pressing need right now. But those are the first two, right? And the just cause idea aligns with the capital S story idea. It's why do you get up every day and do what you do in your organization? And there's two facets to that we're really talking about. One that you just mentioned is if my audience of potential clients, customers, whatever, is going to be millennials or Gen Z, how do I reach them? And in this critical time when we're all concerned about talent, if I want to engage these folks and bring them onto my team, what story do I need to share? It's the same story. One of the things that's true about millennials and Gen Z is if they see you telling one story to customers and a different story to employees, boom, they're out. Because to them, that fits in that old paradigm that we started talking about where people are lying to them. It's got to be the same story, but think of it in a family dynamic. This is frequently the way I think of it. You know, there was an incident when I was a kid where I'm one of 4 kids. I was the oldest. My sister Sharon, I was 12. She was 6 at the time. One of us broke a lamp. Okay. Mom and dad were in the other room. So somebody has to come in and, you know, be the authority figure and share the story, right? It's got to be the same story because for me, the 12-year-old, or my sister, the 6-year-old, even a 6-year-old could call BS on an inauthentic story, right? Now, the people we're talking about, they're adults, they're young adults, they're part of a different generation, maybe than some of our listeners today. But the point is this, you got to tell a consistent story, although this way you tell it, the pictures, the words, the experiences might be slightly different for customers and clients than it is for the people you're trying to attract to the organization. And frankly, Eric, historically, that's where a lot of companies fail. You can't have glossy advertising like marketing to get talent. That's not what people are looking for when you're hiring talent. So it has to be like a diamond, a different facet of the jewel that you expose to your potential talent.
Yeah. Do you have any good examples of that? Because I mean, this is so crucial to folks.
Yep.
Because it could really give businesses a competitive advantage. I mean, they want it when they're selling to people, and now people are seeing it in their talent. So how do you give them, you know, can you give folks a couple examples of how to make that a competitive advantage inside their company to who they're bringing into?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the ways that this is done, and social media can be a great tool for this, is highlighting the stories of people in the organization who align with the values in your capital S story. So I've seen a number of companies, large and small, using tools such as Instagram stories to give you a day in the life of what it's like to work for your organization. Now, one of the things that we also know about millennials and Gen Z is that they are digital natives. They're comfortable with those platforms, right? So what are they going to do when an organization says, here's Eric. Eric represents exactly the kind of person who belongs at the Center for Victory. Eric's going to get out there on social media and he's going to share his story. Everybody who's connected to Eric, and this gets more in your wheelhouse, Eric, and the work you do at the Center for Victory, but it's probably likely that if Eric's a great employee for your organization, he knows other people in his real world and digital social network who also might be good employees, right? So that natural viral sharing of the story is a great way to take your capital S story as embodied by your best employees and get it out there into the marketplace of ideas. So that's not a job wanted ad, right? Or hiring at, right? It's a
Right.
very different approach.
Yeah, I mean, it answers the why. I mean, there's a calling towards that. I mean, it's like, can't remember how you put it in the book, Paul. I'm probably gonna goof it up, but really,
That's okay.
their why has to solve, would you call it, their unique problem, right?
Yes.
So their problem, their challenge is they want purpose.
Yes.
Right?
They
They
want
want to be attached
purpose.
to that.
Right. And in point of fact, every generation ever has wanted purpose, although it may have been defined differently over the course of time. But because of everything we talked about earlier in the episode, the life experiences of millennials and Gen Z, it's really brought this hunger for purpose in their work to the surface. And you see this now coming out of the pandemic. There have been a number of surveys done about what would get people to come back to a physical work environment, what people are looking for in terms of their work situation. And the statistics are stunning. What I'm seeing on average is people would be willing to give up 10 to 12% of their pay to continue in certain kinds of work environments that they find comfortable, predominantly hybrid or remote work, right? And who are those people? Predominantly, it's millennials and Gen Z that we're talking about. Because one of the things we did see with the pandemic, and there's a number of statistics on this too, is that older folks in the workforce took advantage of other avenues available to them that Gen Z and millennials don't have because of their age, as in early retirement. So they're out of the workforce, right? There's a significant percentage of that. I saw a story last week. The number of people who took early retirement in the last 18, 19 months, according to government statistics, is 5% ahead of what it would have expected to be. So a lot of people left the workforce. Don't just take my word for it. There's factual basis for it. So it's even more critical, as we're talking about today, to be thinking about what can I do, what story can I share to attract the right millennials and Gen Z employees into my workplace.
Okay, one more thing that I want you to speak on, if you can.
Yep.
Right?
Sure.
Once we get them in,
yes,
that story is important to continue to convey and tell, and because that can drive production and it can drive engagement. So then we don't have to worry, they're remote, are they working?
Yes.
Those kinds of things. Speak to that too, Paul, because that story I've seen it. I've seen some of the companies that you work with. I know for us, what we expel, when we back that up, it drives that production and engagement, right?
It does, because, we talked a little bit about my book. So think of your story for a moment as a book. As you're adding new people to the story, you are creating the opportunity for new chapters. And those new chapters have as the heroes these employers you're bringing on board. So in your example, Eric, if you're looking to increase production, well, that's a very business numbers oriented goal. But as part of the story, it's how does Eric or how does Paul do this? What's the story of Eric or Paul helping to drive production, being the hero in that sense, in that chapter of the overall story, right? One of the things about great stories is that they evolve over time. They can't be the same story over and over again. People get bored by that, right? Now, there are great classic stories, and this is one of the themes of the book, that we tell over and over again, but it's in different settings and, different names and characters. For example, Robin Hood is Luke Skywalker, is in some iterations Dirty Harry, right? It's the same kind of outlaw story, right? But it can be retold over and over again because in different settings with different characters, you can share that story. And it's the same within your organization. If you need to hire 10 or 50 or 100 people, that story can be customized at the level of that individual so they become part of the story and they see how their work and their purpose fits within the larger narrative.
All right, one more. I know I just said that was the last one, but one more. You had me think of something. The light bulb went off. Helping these young people, because if you look at the stats, right, we share one stat that says somewhere like 57% of younger folks leave their work because their manager isn't involved in their development.
Yes.
All right. One of the light bulb that just went off for me right now with you is, if you could speak just a little bit to this, is when we're coaching and developing young people, how do we help them with their story so it aligns with ours?
Wow, that's a great question. And the way to do that, I think, is to give them a narrative that they can fill in the blanks themselves. So if there's a value or a behavior, more importantly, that drives a specific value in your organization, what you want to do is say, Eric, the story that I see for you is Eric is in this situation and he takes this action, and as a result, it delivers this happy ending. And that gives Eric the opportunity to go out and make that story his own.
Yeah.
And again, that's a piece of the overall story, right?
Right. But it keeps them engaged. That was just, I know I'm excited about it because it was, I knew it, but I knew it when you were talking about that, like with that coaching to help them develop that narrative that, yes. Because when, going back to what you say, why would they buy, work, invest, and partner with you? If they have a similar story, it's hard to leave.
Yes, it is.
And that's driving the why. And again, going back to some of the other things that you said, if they're like that, they're bringing in other people like that, giving you the competitive advantage. And that story isn't stagnant anymore. It's alive. Mm-hmm. It's just a different iteration with a different person and helping them find their own unique story. So, boy, we could unpack that in another one.
We certainly could. I'd be happy to do that too if you wanted to.
Well, yeah. Wow, this has been great, Paul. Wow. This has been really good. If you listen to this and you can't get something out of that, well, probably shame on you, but lots of good tidbits here. Before we forget, Paul, how can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you. So if you go to www.capitalsstory.com, you'll wind up on a page that will tell you all about the book. And from there, you can download a sample chapter, go to Amazon and purchase it if you want to. And you can also learn more about our firm, WordWrite. If you'd like to just go directly to the WordWrite website, it's WordWritePR, like public relations.com, WordWritePR.com. That's the best way to reach me. My email's there, my phone number's there. And I'd be happy to have a conversation there, or even on social media. All of our social media handles are there as well. Yeah, it's good to stay connected with you, Paul, because you and your team also provide good tidbits here and there just to keep it, again, alive and well. But thanks again, Paul. Always a pleasure to have you on. Likewise, Eric.
If you want to unpack that next one, we'll do it, sometime in the new year.
That sounds great.
Okay, but thanks, guys. I appreciate you listening, watching. Make sure you leave this video a like, leave a comment down in the comment sections below. If there's something else you want to hear from me or from our dear friend Paul, put it down in those comment sections. We'd also appreciate if you hit the subscribe button. For more information about us, you can always go to centerforvictory.com or give us a holler on any of our social media as well. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make sure you make this day your best day yet. We'll see you later.